Hey, you might recall this time yesterday, we carried an item on the annual summit of the BVCA, the first time the industry body for private equity and venture capital has held its big yearly get-together in person since 2019. Well, the BVCA is not the only one. The events organiser Hyve Group said this week that the speed of its recovery since the end of COVID restrictions has surpassed expectations. Well, joining me now is the Chief Executive of Hyve Group, Mark Shashoua. Mark, welcome to you. I gather two of your biggest recent events were in excess of what you were seeing before the pandemic.
Yes, that's right. Well, good morning, Ian. Good to see you again. Yes, we are, the second half in particular, the last 6 months, we're back to nearly 100% recovered, which includes the fact that some of our Chinese shows weren't able to be held. But yeah, I just came back from America a few weeks ago from one of our major events, which is called Grocery Shop, which was 40% larger than it was pre-pandemic. So the return of market-leading events, certainly the ones that Hyve are running, is coming back very strong.
I mean, you operate, as you've just hinted, in a number of markets around the world. Is the recovery pretty even globally? I imagine China is obviously the big exception.
You're absolutely right. I mean, China's the exception largely because they're still operating under a zero COVID policy. But everywhere else we're seeing, and we now are shifted dramatically towards advanced economies now. So we operate largely in Europe and UK and America. And all of those events we're seeing the same type of recovery across all of those events. You know, the key thing is it the main event of its kind in its sector and in its geography, which are the ones that we operate? Those we are seeing a very strong return of customers coming back.
And if you strip out the impact of inflation, because I imagine it's pushed up your costs, are customers paying more to attend events and put on stands and so forth?
Yeah, well, what we're seeing is quite a significant customer like-for-like increase in spend, for sure. And that's not because we're seeing, sort of marketing budgets getting bigger. I mean, let's be clear. So that is very much more customers spending more money at our events than they were pre-pandemic. And also that trend is continuing into next year. And that we're seeing is because people are prioritizing the main event in its particular sector and its particular geography. Probably largely to, sort of reducing spend maybe at smaller, less relevant events, but then putting more money towards the main event. And that we're seeing. So it's been quite significant growth like for like of customer spend in our events.
You don't put it down to, for example, a bit of pent-up demand there, or is that an element as well?
Ian, I think we're way past the point of sort of pent-up demand. So we've had a significant rollover originally from 19 or 2020 into 2021, but 21 to 22 and then 22 going into next year. We are way past the point of pent-up demand. And so it has been consistent like-for-like customer spend across those years and very much continuing into next year.
And are you still receiving insurance payouts for cancelled events during the pandemic and the aftermath?
Well, look, we have been clearly blessed that we changed our insurance policies, when we first arrived in 2017. So look, we had, throughout 2020, throughout 21 and throughout 22, we have had significant insurance proceeds. We're pretty much at the end of that. So, it covered what it was supposed to cover the 2 years of the pandemic.
And have your premiums gone up subsequently?
Look, the reality is the type of insurance that we were able to get before, we can't get now, which is largely for communicable disease. That may change as time goes on. But therefore, the normal insurance policies that we have, the premiums are broadly the same.
And you mentioned just now you were pivoting away from some markets and into others. You sold your Turkish business earlier in the week. What was the thinking there?
Well, Ian, I think the first time we met, we were pretty much, when we first arrived and took over the company in 2017, we were 95% emerging markets. So most of the business was centered around Russia, Southeast Asia, Turkey itself, and markets like that. We have, through a massive transformation and growth program, for which we have continued throughout COVID, we're now literally the exact opposite. We are now way over 90% in advanced economies. That was very much part of the strategy, was to focus on those countries, focus on key industry sectors of growth. So selling Turkey was always part of the plan. It was always, well communicated that we were largely exiting emerging markets and focusing on advanced economies.
Gotcha. Right, Mark, always good to see you. Thanks very much for joining me today.
A real pleasure. Nice to see you.